So, to get the background of what we are going to read today, I will read out the summary of the previous paragraph so that we get a sense of continuity. Okay, so now, Sharma said in the earlier paragraph, as the evolution proceeds, man grows in consciousness and mind, develops himself sufficiently to realize the subtler aspects and forces in the cosmos. He has an intuition of a reality beyond earth and heaven, terrestrial and supraterrestrial, an extra cosmic absolute that is the origin and supreme source of all. He has a vague feeling that there is something called God, okay, who is running this universe. Very vague idea. Okay. This feeling usually arises in man by spiritual ardor, the soul's need for perfection. It is aided and enhanced by many factors. One factor is a disappointed disgust of vital life by failure. When you go on failing, you feel that there is no purpose in the physical world here and better to go elsewhere, and that is God. Second factor, the utter vanity and purposelessness of earthly life. Okay? There doesn't seem to be any purpose. Everything is just okay. Every day I'm getting up, having breakfast, lunch, dinner, going to sleep. But what is the point? That's what you feel sometimes. Not everybody, but they do feel sometimes. The third point, which helps you to go towards God, the aimlessness of repeated births in a cycle without success or any issue. The lives go on one by one, but what's the point? That's what it is. Now, the ordinary man, even if aware of these feelings, may not summon up enough will and courage, enough will and spiritual drive to attempt the seeming impossible ascent. Spiritual life is very difficult. And the ordinary man says, okay, maybe God is there, but it's too difficult. I don't bother about it. But the exceptional man, the unusual man, abandons all to follow the soul's aim and only need. The soul is wanting only God. In fact, the imperfection of life, instead of discouraging him, only serves to strengthen and harden his resolve to attain his ideal. History has witnessed such periods of spiritual intensity in mankind where many pursue the ideal, but the remainder lead the normal material life even while believing in its unreality, as in India. Especially in the Vedic period, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, this was the condition. There was a lot of spiritual effort going on. And many were also not in the spiritual life, although they believed in the divine. But this belief in the illusion view of the world, even while living, the material life dampens and blunts the interest in the physical world and results in a great fall. Okay? You think that the physical world is unreal and then there's a fall. This leads to the failure of the progressive mind. The progressive mind is one who wants to progress even in the physical world, ending in misery, illiteracy, ignorance, and impoverishment in every sphere of life. This is what happened in India. Okay? Thus, again, the divine equation of spirit and matter was missed, as well as the entire will of God in creating a world with a clear purpose was badly misunderstood. Then, particularly, he is talking about the period when the Mayavada philosophy came into existence. So the clear idea, give up the physical world, was there, and that was the problem which led to the fall of novel life in India. The spiritual life was there, but the lack of interest in the physical life was there, which was there in the Vedic period. But 8th century AD, after Shankara revived the Vedantic philosophy, he was misunderstood, and the aim of life became escaping from life. Therefore, Srimba is saying the divine equation of spirit and matter was missed, as well as the entire will of God in creating a world with a clear purpose was badly misunderstood. As he says in one place, he says the reality of spirit was understood very well by the Indians, but the reality of in matter was not understood at all. Okay, that was the period between 800 AD and in modern times. For 1200 years, this problem continued for a long time in India. Okay. That's what he said in the previous one. So now we come back to the equation of spirit and matter. Okay. I'm going to read each sentence, and now you know what he's talking about. That equation can only be found if we recognize the purport of our whole complex human nature in its right place in the cosmic movement. Okay. I'll stop at each phrase because you have to see that equation. What is meant by equation? That spirit and matter are really the same thing. They are equated with each other. That's what is meant. Okay, so that equation can be found, but only if we recognize what is the purpose of human existence in the physical world with our complex human nature. Why complex? You have a mind, you have a vital, and you have a body, which are not at all similar. Each one is fighting against the other. That's why it is complex. Okay, in its right place in the cosmic movement. What is needed is to give its full legitimate value to each part of our composite being and many-sided aspiration and find out the key of their unity as well as their difference. So now, what's he saying? What is needed? What is needed for what? To understand that God is there in matter also. That is what is needed. So if you want to understand that, you have to give full legitimate value. Full value you have to give, but also you have to understand that it is really legitimate. Okay? That it is right. Okay? To each part of our composite being. Which is our composite being? Again, body, life, matter, body, life and mind, as well as the soul. Okay? You have to, this is a composite being. And many-sided aspiration. What does it mean by many-sided aspiration? You want knowledge. So you go to Jnana Yoga. You want love for the divine. And therefore you go to the Bhakti Yoga. Then you want also many-sided aspiration he's talking about. So you want also to put on the divine nature. Then you go to Karma Yoga. Okay? So many-sided aspiration. And this is what you have to understand fully. And then only you will be able to get the feeling that matter and spirit are one. And find out the key of their unity as well as their difference. This is exactly what he has done in the synthesis. If you remember, the first 3-4 chapters, that's exactly what he has done. And he says that we will do exactly what nature is doing. Nature has not rejected matter when it introduced life. And it has not rejected life and mind, matter when it has introduced mind. So why should we also do that? We'll follow exactly what nature is doing. That's what he said very clearly in the synthesis. Okay? And he's saying the same thing here in very brief. Okay? The finding must be a synthesis or an integration. And since the development is clearly the law of the human soul, it is most likely to be discovered by an evolutionary synthesis. You will find out synthesis. A synthesis of this kind was attempted in the ancient Indian culture. In fact, in Essays on the Gita, he has given you the list of syntheses which were tried out. The first synthesis was the Vedic period. And what was the synthesis? Matter and spirit are the same. Heaven is my father and the earth is my mother. So that's a synthesis in the Vedic period. Then came the synthesis of the Tantra. Okay? The Purusha and Prakriti, both are real. Then you have the Gita synthesis, the synthesis of the Gita, in which the Gita combines Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, but it also combines Purusha and Prakriti and goes on to the next level. Okay? So all these are the synthesis which he lists in the essays on the Gita. So, a synthesis of this kind was attempted in the ancient Indian culture. And finally, the last synthesis is Ramdar's own synthesis, where he says that we reject nothing, nothing at all. We include everything in our effort towards God. It accepted 4 legitimate motives of human living. So, man's vital interests and needs. Okay? Man's vital interests and needs, you remember? I'll finish this and then we'll come back to it. His desires, his ethical and religious aspiration, his ultimate spiritual aim and destiny. In other words, the claims of his vital, physical and emotional being, the claims of his ethical and religious being, governed by a knowledge of the law of God and nature and man, and the claims of his spiritual longing for the beyond, for which he seeks satisfaction by an ultimate release from an ignorant, mundane existence. A huge sentence, so we'll go step by step. It accepted 4 legitimate motives of human living. You remember what he says? Okay. Dharma, Artha, then what are the other ones? Sannyasa, and finally, moksha and sannyasa. Okay, so these are the
Artha,
4.
Artha, Karma, Dharma, Moksha.
Pardon?
Artha, Karma, Dharma, Moksha.
That's right. Okay. But there is one, but then there is also sannyasa. And sannyasa was the weak point in the whole thing. Okay. So artha is earn a living, and kama, okay, satisfy the lower nature. That also is part of life. Okay. So you raise a family, have children, earn, and then after you have done all that, then you can go to the religious part of life, and then finally you give up and go to vanaprastha. Okay. So this was he is referring to the Indian, which is a synthesis. It is not rejecting life. So it accepted the 4 legitimate aims. Then his ultimate spiritual aim and destiny. In other words, the claims of his vital, physical and emotional being, the claims of his ethical and religious being, governed by a knowledge of the law of God and nature and man, and the claims of his spiritual longing for the beyond. Okay? For the beyond, that is the supra-terrestrial, not the physical world itself, for which he seeks satisfaction by an ultimate release from an ignorant, mundane existence. This was the last point, which at that time was okay, but now you have to reject that last one also. You have to get the release, but you cannot get away from the physical world. In the new idea that has been promulgated by Sri Aurobindo, it provided for a period of education and preparation. This is the student life. Okay, it provided for a period of education and preparation based on the idea of life, a period of normal living to satisfy human desires and interests under the moderating rule of the ethical and religious part in us, a period of withdrawal and spiritual preparation, and last, a period of renunciation of life and release into the spirit. He is referring here to Brahmacharyam, then Grihastham, then what is the third one?
Vanaprastha.
Vanaprastha, and then finally
Sannyasa.
Sannyasa. Yeah. So these are the 4 things he is referring to without giving the names. Okay. Very clearly. Provided period of education, Brahmacharya. Preparation based on the idea of life, okay, and a period of normal living, Grihastha. Then finally, satisfy human desire and interest, that was saying, under the moderating rule of the ethical and religious part in us with dharma, okay, the grihastham with dharma, a period of withdrawal and spiritual preparation, vanaprastha, and finally a last period of renunciation of life and release into spirit, this is the sannyasa, giving up. Evidently, if applied as a universal rule, this prescribed norm, this delineation of the curve of journey would miss the fact that it is impossible for all to trace out the whole circle of development in a single short lifetime. It's not possible to do that in one lifetime. Therefore, but it was modified by the theory of a complete evolution pursued through a long succession of rebirths before one could be fit for a spiritual liberation. This synthesis, with its spiritual insight, largeness of view, symmetry, completeness, did much to raise the tone of human life. He is giving it high praise because it didn't reject anything. Okay? It did much to raise the tone of human life. But that is the reason why in India, the idea of religion, the idea of dharma is so strongly stressed. Even those who are ordinary, not living a spiritual life, the idea of dharma and religion is very strongly imprinted on the human mind in India. This synthesis with its spiritual insight, largeness of view, symmetry, note the word symmetry, everything is taken into account, nothing is rejected. Completeness did much to raise the tone of human life, but eventually it collapsed. Its place was occupied by an exaggeration of the impulse of renunciation, which destroyed the symmetry of the system and cut it into two movements of life in opposition to each other. A normal life of interests and desires with an ethical and religious coloring, okay, normal life but with dharma and little bit of religion, and the abnormal or supernormal inner life founded on renunciation. This became the standard after for about 1200 years. The old synthesis, in fact, contained in itself the seed of this exaggeration and could not but lapse into it. And what was that? The sannyasa. That was the weak point. Okay. At that time it is okay, but it was overstressed. Because sannyasa is good. You can give up, but don't give up the physical world. You can give up your desires, you can give up your ego, you can give up many things, but not give up the world. For if we regard the escape from life as our desirable end, if we omit to hold up any high offer of life fulfillment, the life on the world must also find its fulfillment. Instead of giving it up, you have to fulfill life here. If life has not a divine significance in it, the impatience of the human intellect and will must end by driving at a shortcut and getting rid as much as possible of any more tedious and dilatory processes. Tedious and dilatory processes, many lives on earth. Okay, so if it cannot do that, or if it is incapable of following the shortcut, it is left with the ego and its satisfaction, but with nothing greater to be achieved here. Therefore, it happened that the idea of renunciation of life became very solid in India. Life is split into the spiritual and the mundane, and there can only be an abrupt transition, not a harmony or reconciliation of these parts of our nature. So this is what happened in India, the release from the physical world, from the samsara. That was the whole idea. Now Srivastava is saying that was the weak point in the very good view of life. Okay, it was very good at that time, but now something else has to be done. So we go to the next para. Who will read? One of you can read. So
I'm reading, Rangat.
okay, go ahead, Chachana.
Spiritual evolution. a spiritual evolution and unfolding here of the being within from birth to birth, of which man becomes the central instrument, and human life at its highest offers the critical turning point. It is the link needed for the reconciliation of life and spirit, for it allows us to take into account the total nature of man and to recognize the legitimate place of his triple attraction to earth, to heaven, and to the supreme reality. But a complete solution of its oppositions can be arrived at only on this basis that the lower consciousness of mind, life, and body cannot arrive at its full meaning until it is taken up, restated, transformed by the light and power and joy of the higher spiritual consciousness, while the higher, too, does not stand in its full right relation to the lower by mere rejection, but by this assumption and domination, this taking up of its unfulfilled values, this restatement and transformation, a spiritualizing and supramentalizing of the mental, vital, and physical nature. The terrestrial ideal, which has been so powerful in the modern mind, restored man and his life on earth and the collective hope of the race to a prominent position and created an insistent demand for a solution. This is the good it has accomplished, but by overdoing and exclusiveness, it unduly limited man's scope. It ignored that which is the highest and in the end the largest thing in him, and by this limitation, it missed the full pursuit of. If mind were the highest thing in man and nature, then indeed this frustration might not result. Still, the limitation of scope would be there, a narrow possibility, a circumscribed prospect. But if mind is only a partial unfolding of consciousness, and there are powers beyond of which nature in our race is capable, then not only does our hope upon earth, let alone what is beyond it, depend upon their development. But this becomes the one proper road of our evolution.
A very interesting para, and his many ideas are there which he has given here in very short, and we'll refer to those ideas which he is saying. So he has told us that we have to get back to a perfect symmetry, a perfect equation between spirit and matter. None should be rejected. Okay, so how to get this? If you realize that there is an evolution, a spiritual evolution. The idea of evolution was there also in the ancient Indian culture, the Dashavata. Very clearly, there's a movement upwards. But the idea, the culminating idea that there should also be a synthesis between spirit and matter was not very prominently put forward in the Dashavata. Okay? The last one is the Kalki, which is but it does not spell out that the physical world also needs to be transformed. It is just put in a very pithy, in a very summary manner. So, if you realize that there is spiritual evolution, then the idea comes that the spiritual evolution is not yet ended. So it should go to the next level. Then you don't reject the physical world. Okay? A spiritual evolution, an unfolding here of the being within, from birth to birth, of which man becomes a central instrument and human life at its highest offers a critical turning point, is a link needed for the reconciliation of life and spirit. So this idea here is given many times. First of all, there is an evolution, and the evolution is very, very slow. So nature very intelligently brings man into the picture and creates man, by whom her evolution now becomes very fast. This is the idea that he is saying here in different words, and we have used elsewhere. He has said this very clearly. Okay, so nature herself is creating man at a point. Okay, when the mind comes in, human being comes in, and now the evolution can become conscious evolution through yoga. So, and of which man becomes the central instrument. Before that, the evolution is very slow and very, very tardy. It took millions of years from matter to life and from life to mind also. But now mind has come in, it can go much faster. Is a link needed for the reconciliation of life and spirit. What is the link? Spiritual evolution. You have to understand the spiritual evolution. And it's very interesting that the evolution which was there in seed form in the Dasavatar was now spelled out very clearly by the idea was first introduced by biological evolution. But Sri Aurobindo has turned that into a spiritual evolution. It's an evolution of consciousness, not the evolution of biological forms. Okay? But because you can understand that the biological forms also, there's a lot of difference in opinions. Some say that there's no purpose to biological evolution. It's going on throwing up all sorts of different mutations of cells and creating different species, but there's no very clear-cut purpose in evolution. There's no nisus, as they say. But there are many who say, no, very clearly you can see that the evolution is from the less complex to the more complex and the more capable. So among the scientists. So there are all these different ideas are there. But Sri Aurobindo turns it to an evolution of consciousness. But note interestingly that in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, the biological evolution is not rejected. It has to be a parallel movement. Only when there is a biological evolution can there be a spiritual evolution which will use that biological form. Okay? Isn't it? You have to realize this. There is a biological form which is a support of the spiritual evolution. Biological evolution is a support for the, because as you keep going higher and higher, the biological form must become capable of more and more divine consciousness. In the animal, a divine consciousness is not possible. So nature throws up the human being where a divine consciousness is possible. And the next evolution, the divine consciousness will be even more possible. Okay? So that's why spiritual evolution is a link, he said. Unless you admit the spiritual evolution, which many don't, and even the biological evolution they don't accept, then the idea of divinization of matter just cannot come. It has to come from a spiritual evolution. It is very, very important. Okay. That's why in Life Divine, the last part of the Life Divine is related to the evolution. Okay. There's a whole section on evolution. So now I go to the next sentence. Not sentence, next phrase. Okay. For the reconciliation of life and spirit. For it allows us to take into account the total nature of man. And which is the total nature of man? Body at the lowest level and self and psychic being at the highest level. And to recognize the legitimate place of this triple attraction. What is the triple attraction? Very clear. First we're saying to earth, which is the material ideal. To heaven, which is a spiritual ideal, but rejecting the physical world. Then to the supreme reality, which is the Sri Aurobindo's point of view. The supreme reality does not reject the physical world. These are the three philosophies possible. Materialism, spirituality, but renunciation of life. And the third one, the recognition that God is all and no rejection of the physical world. That's the supreme reality. But a complete solution of its oppositions can be arrived at only on this basis, that the lower consciousness of mind, life, body cannot arrive at its full meaning unless it is taken up, restated, transformed by the light and power and joy of the higher spiritual consciousness, while the higher too does not stand in its full right relation to the lower by mere rejection, but by this assumption and domination, this taking up of its unfulfilled values, this restatement and transformation. Note the word restatement. I'll get back to where he has said this elsewhere. Okay? And transformation, a spiritualization and a supermentalization of the mental, vital, and physical nature. Now, he's talking of restatement. So what Sri Aurobindo said in Life Divine, he has said that in India, the Vedic period was a period of tremendous spiritual development. But it is the old treasure, he says, Okay, and he uses this very interesting image. He says there is the old capital. Okay, the capital means money, which was very valuable, but it was put into the bank and it was not being utilized. So now he says we will use that old capital and turn it for the modern view, will restate the old but with new forms. So what he means is we will revive the Vedic idea on spirit and matter being one. Okay? We will restate it and put it in more modern terms. Okay? And also this image that the old capital, that money, the huge spiritual development that took place in the Vedic period was lying it was lying simply unused in India for 5,000 years. Okay? Now we will take up that whole idea and reinvest that money which is lying in the bank and put it to a purpose. Okay? That's exactly the image that he's using when he's saying restatement and transformation. Transformation of the old idea. A spiritualization, but not also supermentalization. So he's saying very clearly the three things that he has told you, the triple attraction to earth, materialism, to heaven, the spiritual idea. Okay? Release from the physical world, and to the supreme reality, his own philosophy. Okay? And we have to change. We have to spiritualize and supermentalize mental, vital, and physical nature. The terrestrial ideal, which is the materialistic ideal, which has been so powerful in the modern mind, restored man and his life on earth and a collective hope of the race to a prominent position and created an insistent demand for a solution. This is the good that it has accomplished. So Swamdev, in the materialist denial in Life Divine, he said very clearly that the materialistic view is not to be rejected. It has done a great deal of good to humans. All fuzzy, hazy, vague ideas are thrown out and superstition is gone, and you build your theory, even spiritual theories, but built on absolute rationalism and make sense of it, not unfounded superstitions. So this is a good. This one phrase that he's saying here, okay, this is a good that is accomplished. Materialism. It has made man see everything in terms of the physical world. But by overdoing and exclusiveness, it unduly limited man's scope. It ignored that which is the highest and in the end, the largest thing in him. And what is that? The self and the psychic being. The materialism does not accept that. And by this limitation, it missed the full pursuit of its own object. What is its own object? Perfection, progress. Okay? He uses the word progressive mind again and again. Okay? So progressive mind, science has got a progressive mind. The idea of progress is ingrained in man. That also he has told us earlier. Okay? You can see how the ideas, he is repeating the ideas and put in different words. Now, he says, if mind were the highest thing in man and nature, then indeed this frustration might not result, because we have gone to the highest result and this is all that is capable of, evolution is capable only of this much. Still, the limitation of scope would be there. If mind were to all, maybe frustration may not be there, but you would want, okay, there is limitation, and that is not good. Okay? You would feel like a narrow possibility, a circumscribed prospect. But if mind is only a partial unfolding of consciousness, and there are powers beyond of which nature in our race is capable, then not only does our hope for the earth, let alone what is beyond it, depend upon their development, but this becomes the one proper route for our evolution. Note interestingly here, Swamdev is not insisting that there is something beyond mind. He's saying if. He is taking you by the hand and leading you towards it. If mind is the last evolutionary object, then limitation is necessarily a fact. But if mind is not, then you can go more. So he is giving you possibilities to select from. Okay, so this is what he's saying. You can see that most of these ideas are there earlier, here and there strewn through his writings, but he is very clearly stating his position. Ultimately, what is that? You have to not reject body, mind, life. You can't reject the earthly life because it is created by God. So if God has created this, there must be a purpose. Find that purpose and don't reject it. That's what it is. So we have got 5 minutes more only. Maybe we can read the next paragraph. Mind and life themselves cannot.
Should I read?
Yeah, you can do that.
Mind and life themselves cannot grow into their fullness except by the opening up of the larger and greater consciousness to which mind only approaches. Such a larger and greater consciousness is the spiritual, for the spiritual consciousness is not only higher than the rest, but more embracing. Universal as well as transcendent, it can take up mind and life into its light and give them the true and utmost realization of all for which they are seeking. For it has a greater instrumentality of knowledge, a fountain of deeper power and will, an unlimited reach and intensity of love and joy and beauty. These are the things for which our mind, life, and body are seeking knowledge, power, and joy, and to reject that, by which all these arrive at their utmost plenitude, is to shut them out from their own highest consummation. An opposite exaggeration, demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence, nullifies the creative action of the spirit and excludes from us all that the divine manifests in its being. It leaves room only for an evolution without sense or fulfillment, for a cutting off of all that has been evolved is the sole culmination. It turns the process of our being into the meaningless curve of a plunge into ignorance and return out of it, or erects a wheel of cosmic becoming with only an escape issue. The intermediary, the supraterrestrial aspiration, cuts short the fulfillment of the being above by not proceeding to its highest realization of oneness, and diminishes it below by not allowing a proper amplitude of sense to its presence in the material universe and its acceptance of life in an earthly body. A large relation of unity on integration restores the balance, illumines the whole truth of being, and links together the steps of nature.
This paragraph we'll do tomorrow in detail. So, because now the time is over, almost only 1 minute left. So, we'll take this up tomorrow. Mind and life themselves cannot grow into their fullness. So, we stop here today. If there are any questions, then we can discuss them. Otherwise, we will stop here today. Okay? See you tomorrow for Life Divine again.
Thank you, Rangada.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
For everybody.
Au revoir.